If you're sitting somewhere between 55 and 65, there's a decent chance you've already thought about logging off. Not retiring exactly, just stepping back quietly from the noise, but before you do, there's one number worth knowing first: £12,547. That's the full new state pension for the 2026 to 2027 tax year, and it sits just £23 below your frozen personal tax allowance of £12,570. That gap matters more than it looks. Walk away from work now without a plan for the years between today and your state pension age, and you're not taking a breather. You're stepping into a tax squeeze and an income gap that could run a decade long, depending on when you were born. It isn't a hypothetical, it's arithmetic, and arithmetic doesn't care how ready you feel. Some of the online chatter calls this a strategic retreat, a badass reclamation of your time, if you believe the headlines. For Gen X here in the United Kingdom, logging off before you've done the maths could cost more than £30,000 in lost employer pension contributions and the growth they'd have earned. That's not a scare figure. That's what 7 years of a stopped 5% employer contribution actually adds up to once you run the numbers. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the 3-step affordability test that tells you whether your retreat is a genuinely smart move or a decision you won't feel the full cost of until you're 67. If you're a Gen Zer trying to work out whether you can actually afford to step back from the job, from the pressure, from being the one everyone leans on, hit subscribe. Arthur's UK Retirement Guide is where we do the maths, not the memes. Here's the number missing from all that talk about a strategic retreat. Your state pension age isn't 66 anymore, not for most of you. As of the 6th of April, 2026, the rise to 67 began. If you were born after the 6th of March, 1961, your retreat now needs to stretch a full extra year before the government pays you a penny. So that £12,547 you just heard about isn't fixed either. It's missing one variable: time. The exact number of years you'll need to fund yourself between the day you log off and the day the state pension actually lands in your account. There's a reason this urge to step back feels so strong right now. Many of you are the sandwich generation, still supporting adult kids who haven't quite launched, while caring for parents in their 80s. You've been the heavy lifter for 30 years. The exhaustion is real. You've covered the mortgage, the car insurance renewal, the unexpected boiler repair, without making a thing of it, because that's simply what you do. But exhaustion isn't the same thing as an affordability sign-off. Feeling done with the pressure doesn't mean your finances are actually ready for you to stop earning. There's a specific pattern behind this, worth naming, what you could call the identity protection line. The version of you that's spent 30 years being reliable, being the one who copes, resists any story where you admit the numbers aren't ready yet. So the mind reaches for a comforting label instead. A strategic retreat, rather than sitting with the plainer, harder question of whether you can actually afford to stop. Say you earn £45,000 and you stop working at 60. That's 7 years of employer pension contributions gone, roughly 5% of your salary every year. Run the maths, and that's about £15,750 in contributions alone. Grown at a modest 5% a year, by the time you'd have turned 67, that missing pot would have been worth close to £22,000. That's the part nobody mentions in the quiet retreat articles. You're not just giving up a wage. You're giving up the years of compounding that would have kept working long after you clocked off for good. The Department for Work and Pensions confirms the full new state pension sits at £241.30 a week this tax year. That's useful to know, but it only tells you what you'll get once you arrive. It says nothing about how you're supposed to live in the years before that first payment lands. The real danger isn't just what you lose in contributions. It's the bridge you have to build yourself, and most people never actually sit down and calculate its length. This is the part most retreat guides skip entirely, the actual maths. 3 steps. Write them down if it helps, because this is what separates a smart exit from a mistake you won't fully feel for a decade. Step 1. Know your exact state pension age. For most of you, that's either 66 or 67, depending on your date of birth. The government's own gov.uk forecast tool will tell you yours in a couple of minutes, and it's worth checking even if you're fairly sure, because assumptions here are exactly what catch people out. That's not a minor detail. It's the entire length of the bridge you're about to build. Get it wrong by even a year, and every number that follows is wrong too. Skip this step, and the other two numbers you calculate, however carefully, are being measured against the wrong finish line. Step 2. The bridge calculation. Take what you actually need to live on each year, not what you earn now, what you genuinely need, and multiply it by the number of years between stepping back and your state pension age starting. Say you need £24,000 a year to live comfortably, and you're stepping back at 60 with a state pension age of 67. That's 7 years, 7 times £24,000, £168,000. Picture that as your council tax, your energy bills, your car insurance renewal, all of it, for 7 straight years, before a single state pension payment arrives. That's the size of the gap you need to fund from your own savings and pensions before the government pension even starts paying out. There's a real cost hiding inside that gap too. Every pound you draw from your bridge early is a pound that stops growing for you. Draw it down too fast in your early 60s, and you could find yourself relying on the state pension alone by your mid-70s, right when costs like healthcare, mobility aids, and home adaptations tend to climb. Step 3. Check your lump sum allowance. This is the tax-free cash you can take from your private pensions, capped at £268,275 across everything you hold. Say you hold £200,000 across your pensions. A meaningful portion of that, up to the cap, can typically come out tax-free, and for some people, taking that tax-free lump sum fills part of the bridge without pushing them into a higher tax bracket. I've watched people build gorgeous spreadsheets for Step 2 and then skip Step 3 entirely because tax planning feels like someone else's job. It isn't. It won't fix everything on its own, but it can meaningfully shorten how far your other savings need to stretch to close the gap. I used to think JOMO, the joy of missing out, was just about deleting social media apps and feeling smug about it. I was wrong. Once I actually sat with the numbers, I realized JOMO isn't a mindset. It's a financial lever, and a genuinely useful one. Cutting the comparison shopping that scrolling tends to trigger. The impulse buys because you saw someone else's kitchen renovation or someone else's holiday saves the average UK household around £5,000 a year. Put £416 a month of that into a low-cost global index fund for 5 years before you retire, and you've added roughly £28,000 to your pot. That's most of a year's bridge, funded simply by logging off the way you meant to in the first place. But there's a clock running on part of this that most Gen Zers are completely ignoring, and it has nothing to do with your birthday. Rewind to 2008. Many of you watched your pension statements crater within months, watched neighbours lose jobs that had looked permanent the week before. That's where the latchkey habit came from originally. Letting yourself into an empty house after school, jiggling the key in a lock that never quite worked, working out early that nobody's coming to save you, you just find a way in. Gen X learned the adult version of that lesson in 2008. Safety was never guaranteed. You build your own. It's the same instinct that's made you check the small print on every fixed-rate mortgage renewal since. That instinct matters again right now because of a decision from HM Treasury. From the 6th of April 2027, the cash ISA limit for anyone under 65 drops from £20,000 to £12,000 a year. Savers 65 and over keep the full £20,000. The overall ISA allowance itself, still £20,000, doesn't change. It's the amount you're allowed to hold specifically in cash that shrinks. It isn't dramatic, it's just arithmetic. £8,000 a year that used to sit tax-free in cash now needs a different home, whether that's a stocks and shares ISA, which carries more risk, or savings held outside a wrapper altogether, where interest above your personal savings allowance starts getting taxed. Think about what £8,000 actually covers in real life: a decent chunk of a boiler replacement, several months of care costs, or the buffer that stops one bad year turning into a genuine crisis. Losing the shelter on it doesn't erase the money, but it does erase some of the protection around it. If part of your strategic retreat plan involves parking a chunk of your bridge fund somewhere safe and easy to access, this tax year, 2026 to 2027, is the last one where you can shelter the full £20,000 in cash inside an ISA. After that, whatever you'd normally protect above £12,000 has to go somewhere else, or sit exposed to tax. It's worth asking yourself honestly, if you logged off tomorrow, would your bridge fund even survive contact with a genuine shock? Not a hypothetical one. A real one, the kind that shows up as a phone call, not a headline. Because for a lot of people planning this retreat, the real test isn't the maths on a good day. It's what happens when life hands you a bill you never planned for. Let's make this real with David. David is 58, works in IT in Manchester, and has built up £200,000 in his SIP. He's tired, the same way you might be. Maybe you recognize some of David in yourself, the quiet exhaustion, the sense that you're the one everyone calls first when something goes wrong. He's been thinking about logging off for the better part of a year. It's not really about David being careless. It's about how easy it is to make an emotional decision in an emotional month without ever opening a calculator. Then his 80-year-old mother needs home care. Full-time care in the UK typically runs £800 to £1,000 a week, and that's not a one-off cost, it's a weekly one, for as long as she needs it. If David quits outright and starts drawing a taxable income from his SIP to cover it, something specific kicks in. It's called the Money Purchase Annual Allowance, and once triggered it caps what he can pay back into any pension at £10,000 a year, permanently for the rest of his working life. That single decision, taken in a stressful month, can quietly cost him tens of thousands of pounds in pension contributions he can never fully replace. If David ever wants or needs to return to work later, even part-time, he's lost the ability to rebuild his pension at anything close to the pace he built it the first time. That's not a punishment for logging off. It's simply how the system is built. Once you start drawing a flexible income, the door to full pension saving narrows behind you, quietly, without anyone telling you it happened. Now the other version. David uses the affordability test from earlier, realizes the full 7-year gap is too wide to close by quitting outright, and drops to part-time instead. He keeps just enough hours to stay inside his employer's pension scheme, so those contributions keep landing. For his mother, he claims attendance allowance, which pays £76.70 or £114.60 a week, depending on her care needs, money that goes toward her care instead of draining his own capital. Over a year, that attendance allowance alone can cover several £1,000s of her care costs, money that would otherwise have come straight out of David's own pension pot, the one he's trying to protect for the very retreat he still wants. The gap between those two versions of David isn't effort, and it isn't love for his mother. Both Davids have plenty of that. What separates them is whether the pressure to just cope pushed him to act before he'd done the maths, or after that first hard phone call from the care agency. If you're feeling this pull to log off, it isn't laziness, and it isn't some character flaw. It has a name: decision fatigue. You've been making decisions for a family, for a team, for a business, for 30 years running, and eventually the well runs dry. There's also a quieter feeling underneath the tiredness, the sense of becoming invisible at work, passed over for the newer, louder ideas, even while you're the one actually holding things together. That feeling is real too, and it has nothing to do with your ability. You've sat through the redundancy rounds, the reorganizations, the polite meetings where younger colleagues got the promotion, and you kept showing up anyway. None of that history shows up on a CV, and it rarely gets mentioned in a performance review, but it's real experience, hard-won, and it doesn't evaporate just because you're tired of proving it every year. It's completely normal to feel like you're running on fumes right now. You came through the recessions of the early 90s, the 2008 crash, and a pandemic that upended how half the country worked. Nobody handed you a manual for any of it. You worked it out as you went, and that takes something out of a person, even when you don't clock it happening at the time. The shift that actually helps isn't quitting. It's reallocating. Stop thinking of this as stepping down and start thinking of it as becoming the person who decides where your time and your capital go, instead of having that decided for you by a job description. You've effectively been running a household and a career for decades. You already know how to allocate scarce resources under pressure. This is the same skill pointed at your own life for once, instead of everyone else's. It isn't a new talent you need to learn from scratch at 58. It's one you've already been using for other people, for years, without ever once turning it on yourself. So once you've done the maths, and you've made peace with the reframe, how do you actually start the retreat without putting your future self at risk? Here's where the retreat actually becomes strategic, instead of just a feeling. None of these 3 steps require quitting your job today or making any big announcement to anyone. They just require a bit of focused time and some paperwork most people keep putting off. First, get your state pension forecast from gov.uk. It takes a few minutes and it tells you 2 things straight away: whether you're on track for the full £241.30 a week, and whether you have your 35 qualifying years of national insurance. That single check can be the difference between retiring on the full amount and quietly losing thousands of pounds a year for the rest of your life, simply because a few years went unrecorded. Redundancy. Time abroad. A period of self-employment where contributions slipped. If you're short, you can often fill the gap with voluntary contributions, and that's far cheaper to sort out at 58 than to discover the shortfall at 68. Second, if you have spare cash sitting outside a wrapper, this tax year, 2026 to 2027, is your last chance to shelter the full £20,000 in a cash say before the limit for under 65s drops to £12,000 from April 2027. Think of it as one more bill worth paying attention to, alongside the mortgage and the car insurance renewal, except this one only needs your attention once. If protecting a bridge fund from tax is part of your plan, the timing here genuinely matters. Third, if you're going to quietly step back, do it in a way that keeps the door open. Reducing to 3 or 4 days a week, rather than stopping outright, usually keeps you inside your employer's pension scheme and keeps your £60,000 annual allowance active, so you're still building, just more slowly, instead of stopping cold. That matters because once your income drops or stops entirely, so does your ability to keep contributing at any real scale, and the annual allowance you never used simply disappears. It doesn't roll forward to next year. There's one more thing worth saying before we wrap up, and it might be the part that matters most for people your age. The strategic retreat is possible. It genuinely is, but only if you bridge the gap to your state pension age, and only if you respect that £12,547 tax floor sitting just below your personal allowance, instead of walking into it unplanned. None of this means logging off is wrong. It means doing it with your eyes open, knowing exactly how many years you're bridging, and exactly what floor you're protecting once you get there. You were the kids who found a way into the house when you'd forgotten your keys, jiggling the key in a lock that never quite worked, or working out which window was left open. You worked it out quietly, without making a scene about it. That same instinct, the one that got you through 2008 and everything since, is exactly what gets you into a secure retirement now. It just needs pointing at the right numbers, not away from them. That's really the whole shift, from logging off out of exhaustion to stepping back on your own terms, with a number in your head instead of just a feeling in your chest. Feeling done with the noise was never the problem. Not knowing your own numbers was. If you want to protect that independence, the one you've earned the hard way, hit subscribe. We'll keep the maths simple and the strategy sharp.